Before we jump in, just a quick note. The material for this explainer comes from the American Anti-Corruption Institute, and the copyright is 2025, the American Anti-Corruption Institute. It's also important to note that the blueprint we're about to walk through uses a fictional scenario, and that's purely for educational purposes. It's all about illustrating the principles of good governance, not pointing fingers at any real person. Okay, with that said, let's get into it.
So glad you're here. Today, we are diving deep into a fascinating blueprint for building institutions that are genuinely resilient to corruption from the inside out. But to get there, we have to start with the most fundamental question of all. When we say fighting corruption, what does that actually look like in the real world?
All right, let's get this defined, because you can't build a strong defense if you're not totally clear on what you're fighting. And it turns out, it's not about just reacting when a scandal hits the news. It's about building something that's always on, a continuous process. And here's the formal definition from our source. I want you to really notice a couple of key words. First up, process. This isn't a one-and-done policy. And second, look who's involved. You've got leaders, employees, and citizens. It takes everyone. The whole goal is to build the system so solid that people can actually trust the power is being used the right way.
So, for this whole process to actually work, it needs to have all these different dimensions. It's got to be holistic, meaning it covers everything, public, private, and nonprofit sectors. It's got to be continuous, not just some project with a start and end date. And it has to be focused on results, drawing on expertise from law, from finance, from tech, you name it. And the social material is crystal clear on this. If you're missing even one of these pieces, the whole system becomes fragmented and, honestly, pretty easy to cheat.
Okay, so if it's this huge, ongoing process, how in the world do you structure it? How do you even begin to get your arms around it? Well, the blueprint breaks it all down into a really clear and powerful three-pronged approach. This is the how-to for building a system that actually works.
And here they are, the three pillars. First, you've got prevention. This is all about designing your systems from the ground up to make corruption less likely to happen in the first place. Then, you have deterrence. This is about making sure that if someone does do something wrong, the consequences are swift, they are certain, and they are serious. And finally, you've got detection. This is about finding the problems when they do happen, and this part is key, fixing the system so they can't happen again. Now, this slide is fascinating because it shows the fatal flaw in most anti-corruption plans. Just look at where the investment goes. Most places pour tons of money and energy into detection and deterrence, basically reacting to problems after they've already happened. Meanwhile, prevention is chronically underfunded. The source puts it perfectly. This is exactly why so many organizations are always chasing corruption instead of actually stopping it.
So, what does this actually look like on the ground? This table gives some fantastic examples. Over in the preventive column, you've got proactive stuff like strong internal controls and real protections for whistleblowers. For deterrence, you see serious consequences like asset recovery and banning offenders from future work. And in the detective column, you have modern tools like data analytics that help you spot problems early. You see, a truly resilient system needs a deep toolkit with options from all three of these categories.
So having the right tools is one thing, but they are pretty useless unless they operate inside a system that's built on an even more fundamental idea. And that brings us to this concept of the symmetry of power. It's simple, really. For every bit of authority you give someone, you have to build in an equal and opposite measure of accountability.
And this, of course, is the classic problem, right? Power, just by its nature, wants to concentrate. It doesn't like being checked. So the core design challenge for any institution that wants to be resilient is this. How do you systematically, intentionally align that power with real accountability? And this just illustrates the solution so brilliantly. You have to engineer symmetry. You don't just hope for it. You build it into the system's DNA. If an official gets power over the budget, they are required to publish the data openly. If they get the power to appoint people to jobs, they are required to screen for conflicts of interest. There are no exceptions. Power never gets a free pass.
But what happens when someone still tries to break the rules? What happens when they try to game the system? What's the ultimate backstop that holds this whole structure together? Well, that leads us to the final and maybe the most important piece of the whole puzzle, the judicial bedrock.
And this is just so critical. All those preventive tools, all that perfectly engineered symmetry, all the whistleblower protections, they all mean absolutely nothing if offenders believe that at the end of the day they can just lean on the courts to get them off the hook. The judiciary is the final line of defense. If that fails, the whole system comes crashing down.
And this quote from the source material just, wow, it perfectly captures the two sides of the coin here. Independence without competence is theater. In other words, a court can be free from influence, but if it's inept, it can't deliver justice. But then look at the other side. Competence without independence is capture. You can have the most brilliant judges in the world, but if they're not independent, they'll just become tools for the powerful. You have to have both. So, how do you actually build a judiciary that has both? Well, the blueprint lays out these incredibly clear, actionable steps. It starts with the basics, like getting politics out of judicial appointments and protecting judges' jobs and budgets from political pressure. And when you combine those structural shields with radical transparency, like publishing every single decision and forcing judges to step aside when they have a conflict, you build a system that deters bad behavior before it even starts. Okay, so we have defined the fight, we've got the three-pronged approach, we've established the judicial bedrock. So, what's the final test? How do you actually know if any of this is working? It really all comes down to this simple but incredibly profound principle. You have to measure what actually matters. I'm not talking about vanity metrics. I'm talking about the real, hard data on risk and resilience. Prevention only works if you are constantly tracking your vulnerabilities and then actually doing something about what you find. And this is the last thought I want to leave you with. It's a question straight from the source that just gets to the absolute core of what it means to build a corruption-resilient institution. Just think about this for any organization, any system. If you can't put a number on it, if you cannot quantify your exposure to risk, are you really managing it? Or are you just managing by hope?